You can please sit down. Thank you. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board at 6:30, and we do have a quorum. Could I have the board members state their names, please?
Matt Atwood.
Ashley Maderas.
Brett Bolian.
Tyler Dixon.
Fred Massey.
Mike Gehart.
Terry Della Paz.
Terry is our alternate. She'll be sitting in place of Jim Lefferts tonight. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes. The board received those. It's 9/11 and 9/25. Are there any concerns or questions about those minutes? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve first 9/11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now a motion to approve 9/25. I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The first order of business tonight is the application for 10 Liberty Street Partners LLC comprehensive permit, master preliminary plan, 25-unit residential apartments. We'll be hearing the technical review committee report recommendations, and this is a public hearing. As a reminder, as always, when we have a public hearing, we expect appropriate behavior. That means no shouting, clapping, exaltations from either side when we're doing this. Everyone who wishes to speak will get a chance to speak. We ask you to keep it to 3 minutes when you're speaking. If you want to say something that has already been said, we would simply ask you to say, I completely support that. That will go on the record. Our intent is when the public hearing opens after we've had the presentation to note the issues that are brought up for and against the proposal. So it will be on the record. But again, we ask you to keep it short. It's not an opportunity for a soapbox. So the first, we'll ask the applicant to provide an overview of the project. Attorney Cox.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I am Attorney Cox here Bruce Cox on behalf of John Lannon and Ron Lauro, a couple of guys that are the limited partner owners of the building. They are local guys. They own the property. They are here. We were thought preliminary on a master preliminary combined. I've spoken with the solicitors, the attorney, and evidently they're going to advise you that this be master only, to my chagrin and disappointment. I'm not going to argue with him about that. I'll let him address that because I'm in a disagreement with him. I believe we can address the issues that are in the report in a full final before you. But nonetheless, this evening I have 4 more witnesses. I have Tom Principe and Josh Moreau of Principe Engineering. They will be first before you. They provided the engineering for the development of this condominium complex. These are not apartments, these are condominiums that will be sold. So the pride and maintenance of ownership will be one of the qualities that will be inserted into this site that has suffered from neglect for 20, 30 years at this point. They will address all the standard things there. Exhibit number 7, which is the plan, will address the site plan, the topography, utilities, where they're going to be located. The sewage and water qualities are, in fact, exhibits 16 and 17, and as well as 19. The Institute of Transportation Engineering trip generation will be addressed by Mr. Principe. It's de minimis effect. The second person on deck will be Cordelia. We call her Cordy Dawson. She's a Cordelia Dawson Architects and Design LLC. She's a professional architect. She has had extensive experience in dealing with historical and merging historical and contemporary designs in so that there's not an offensive effect to that. She assisted us with her development of the elevations and such, which you have and you'll be putting up on the board for the public to see. They're your exhibit number 10 in your package. The last independent witness we have is Miss Melinda Loge. She's the executive director of the Community Housing Land Trust for Rhode Island. She'll be pointing out the fact that the building will in fact have 7 affordable units within it. There are deed restrictions that I've been drafting since 2005. I sort of started when I saw my first foray into this nearly a score ago. It's scary when you can talk in scores about your professional experience, but she will be talking about how one qualifies for it, how they monitor it, and how it is in fact established and held that way for 30 years of ownership through various people. You have a draft of the deed restrictions, which will be signed not only by the person purchasing the unit, but by the town and by the monitoring agency, so that there'll be an assurance of that continuity. And last but far from least, I have Ron and John here, who are the people that are actually be doing the work. They own the site. They are in this business. They saw this as a good opportunity to do good for Warren, as well as a reasonable business opportunity. And so when there are questions that are arising or requests that are made, we've met with the board in the TRC. John likes to point out a record 5 times. We were caught sort of between 2 different planners, and we had 4 formal TRCs during the day. And then we had a final formal TRC with a new planner doing an entity review structure that he received as a lot of his packages, what you have. Not wishing to speak too much more, because that's what lawyers tend to do. I will, at this point, bring Mr. Principe up to discuss the technical engineering aspects of the project.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tom Principe, Principe Engineering Company, registered professional engineer here in the state of Rhode Island. So again, I know this isn't a technical TRC meeting, so I just want to keep it brief and just kind of give a bird's eye view of the technical aspects of the site, the existing conditions, the utilities. And I'd be happy to kind of get into any more questions that the board or the public might have regarding that. So with that said, again, we do know where this site is on Liberty Street, the old former site of Liberty Street School. We're in a village business district. The square footage of the lot is just over ½ an acre. It's about 0.6 acres of total land area. It slopes from the rear portion of the property towards Liberty Street. A majority of the site is paved or remnants of impervious asphalt. There is no any sort of drainage mitigational measures that are on this property, given the fact of when it was constructed, there were no drainage regulations back then. And I'll get into that in a moment of what we're proposing for those drainage regulations. We do have sewer and water, gas and electric, so all public utilities are available to us. For the water system, we did have Bristol County Water review and test the water, and we do have plenty of pressure there. We have about 66 pounds per square inch of pressure there. What we are proposing are new water services for the domestic water for both the front building and the rear building. We are also proposing off to the that would be the west side, so the right-hand side of the property as you enter it. New fire service for both buildings, so they'll be in compliance for not only the existing Liberty Street School building, but the proposed building in the rear that we're proposing the 18 units in the rear portion of the building. The existing sewer system will be rebuilt. There's an existing 4-inch diameter sewer line that connects Liberty Street building out to the street. And then they actually ran an existing 4-inch sewer line along the right-hand side or west side of the existing Liberty Street towards the back. Maybe they thought there was going to be future development in the back. We're not sure, but that is all going to be kind of reconstructed and in compliance with new standards. That's going to be reconstructed as a 6-inch diameter sewer line to accommodate the capacity of the number of units we're proposing in the back, which again, we are proposing, for the record, 7 units on the Liberty Street School building in the front, and then 18 units in the back for the new building being proposed. Gas is again available in the street. We're going to run a new gas line off to the east, which is the left side of the property that will service both buildings. There's a utility pole right on the front of Liberty Street School that will all go underground. So we will not have any overhead wires on this property. As far as parking is concerned, I know there were a lot of questions with this, and given the site geometry here. We ran through a lot of different scenarios here. And obviously, you know, we tried to maximize parking as best we could. We were able to do a scenario with 28 parking spots. Some are mixed with parallel parking spots off to the west, which is again, the right-hand side of the page, and then vertical parking space in front of the proposed building, which is over the top of the drainage field, which I'll explain later. As far as turning radiuses, we did work with the fire chief on the minimum turning radiuses for his fire apparatus, which is approximately 28 to 30 foot turning radius. So we did a model of a fire apparatus to make sure they can make that turn in between the two buildings. So the rear portion of the Liberty Street School building, and then the front portion of our proposed building, just to assure that a fire apparatus could safely turn around there. The drainage portion of this project, we do have, you can kind of see in bold those little rectangles on the sheet there. Those are an underground stormwater infiltration system. You see this a lot, especially on big developments where we don't have the space. This goes actually underneath the pavement. So when we were out there doing the soil testing, the soils are really great, porous, sandy material with a very, very deep water table. So it's very good drainage, unlike most of the sites that we do now. So we're able to put something underground the pavement. And with that, we have not only water quality, we have a recharge, and also the rate and the volume of runoff will be reduced for the overall site after the project. Because mind you, what I said previously is most of the site is pavement. It's uncontrolled. It just runs off without any sort of control. So actually with this project, with that drainage system being designed and implemented, we'll actually have a reduction of runoff from the site itself. Traffic. So obviously I know everybody is concerned about traffic. So, you know, we actually reached out to the Department of Transportation on some of their recent trip studies that they did on Main Street. And then the letter that our office produced on September 25th should be for the record as well. With this development, there for the AM and PM peak hours, where there will only be 11 additional trips in the AM peak hour and only 13 trips in the PM peak hour. So when you compare that to the Department of Transportation study of Main Street, they have approximately 12 to 1,300 trips on Main Street per that peak hour. So not for the day, but for that peak hour. So what we're doing is we're just comparing on what we're proposing and what's already there. And it's almost less than 1% of the traffic volume that you're seeing on Main Street for our project. Again, there's going to be proposed landscape areas outside of the parking areas, which was off to the, if you can kind of see, there's a hatched area. It says proposed landscape area off to the northeast portion of the new buildings. And I know we've talked about some plantings. Our clients talked about some plantings, possibly putting plantings on the other property. I know that they're negotiating with that to put some vegetation screening there, which we will be showing also on a subsequent plan here. Speaking of vegetation, the 2 trees out in the front of the property will be removed as part of this project. We've had some people look at this, and over the years, again, I don't have a concluded report on this from an arborist, but with all of the disturbance and pavement already around these trees, they've already disturbed them as well. So that's why we're going to replace these trees either off-site or on-site, some sort of vegetation or some sort of landscaping plan that will be subsequent to this, that will be forthcoming. But those trees are planning to be removed, especially for site distance and all the construction itself. With that said, I can open the floor to any questions the board might have at this time.
If
Or
they want to go through the entire application.
That's fine.
I would ask the board, if you've got specific questions related to this, just make a note of it.
Yeah, okay,
We'll then respond and then
I'll come
we'll go
back.
to the public hearing.
no problem.
Thank you.
The next on deck will be Cordelia. She will come up and she will have her elevations there. Thank you very much for. She is, as I said, she's a licensed architect here in Rhode Island, and will explain how she facilitated the revitalization of the Liberty Street School.
Hello, my name is Cordelia Dawson. Have my own practice, Cordelia Dawson Architecture and Design based in Bristol. And so I'd like to speak with you mainly talking about the exterior at this point. We're going to touch more on kind of the division of the interior and units within the building further on in the presentation. But just in looking at the original Liberty School, which was built in 1847, there's some beautiful things there that we want to preserve and keep as a resource in town. In general, it's in good condition. The windows have already been replaced. A lot of the brick has been repointed throughout its history. The cupola is in fairly bad state at this point and will need to be rebuilt. There's no intention of changing it or altering it as far as what's on the original building. The only change that we proposed at this point, other than some repairs, replacing with wooden kind where we have wood soffit rot or damage, would be removing the fire escapes. And that would just clean up the exterior, and through the addition of an interior sprinkler system and planning for egress, we're hopeful that we can do that. Some of the defining characteristics are we have lovely hoods above the windows. There's the protruding entry bay on the front, which defines the entrance. And then, of course, the brick facade, which is very distinguished. The roof line you will notice is a low profile roof line. You don't see a lot of roof because of the hip form that's there. So those were kind of some of the elements that we looked at, as well over the 6/6 double hung window pattern. Can we go to the next slide? So for the new structure, we wanted to consider some of those defining elements and be secondary to it, but also allow a connection between the two buildings. So because there's such generous floor height in the school, we have lovely high ceilings. We have some verticality to work with. The new building is just under 40 feet. The existing building is just over 40 feet. So it'll be slightly lower than the new building. We proposed, again, a shallow hipped roof so that you're not seeing a ton of roof area. The new roof material would be asphalt shingles, similar in color to what's there now. For the north elevation, which is street facing, and what you see in combination when you're looking at the Liberty Street School, we would do a brick facade and again define the entryways with a slight bump out, and then creating the horizontal elements of the hoods above the openings, similar to what's on the original building. Overall, the new building would be simpler and not appear as if it's trying to exactly replicate the historic building, but pick up on some of the defining elements. For the east, west, and south facades, we're proposing clapboard siding. We would ideally like to do a composite material so that it's more easy to maintain than traditional wood siding. There are plenty of examples of wood clapboards within the neighborhood. We are not proposing vinyl siding. There'd be defining corner boards, window trim, so that we still kind of see the differentiation in the openings. And the window patterning is somewhat similar to the original building, but with an emphasis on getting light and circulation into each and every unit and providing the necessary egress. We have proposed an accessible unit on the first floor. So on the east elevation, you can see that there's a ramp coming out of the building, and that's to provide direct access to that designated unit. Overall, the building won't be too far above grade, but as is prudent in our climate, we want to keep it above the grades so that we reduce chances for water infiltration in the basement. Overall, we're planning to have 7 units in the original building. They're divided between the basement and the first and second floors. Because of the floor height, we are able to create 3 floors in the new building, and we'll have an additional 12 2-bedroom units and 6 1-bedroom units, one which will be accessible. And then the basement space provides additional amenities for storage and community space. I think that's what I have at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next on deck will be Melinda Loge, the Executive Director of the Community Housing Land Trust of Rhode Island. She is here to testify. She has been agreed to be our monitoring agency, and she will assist in the distribution of the affordable units throughout the facility versus trying to compact them anywhere. And she
Hello, good evening. Melina Lodge, Executive Director of the Housing Network and Community Housing Land Trust of Rhode Island. I think before I get into sort of the technical components of monitoring services and the application process that potential homeowners in this development would undergo, I wanted to contextualize, I think, some of the housing crisis as it relates to Warren. So as of the most recent fact book, which came out last Friday, the average rent for a 2-bedroom unit in Warren is $2,300 a month, which is slightly above the state average of $1,996 per month. The median home price for an average typical home in the town of Warren is about $410,000, which is pretty close to the state average, and requires an income of $131,500 annually to support. Yet the median income for the town of Warren is only $75,755. So for many people who live in the town of Warren, homeownership is absolutely out of reach, and not by an insignificant amount that, you know, maybe a little more of a mortgage could overset, but just simply out of reach. The rate of homeownership, I think, reflects that. In that Warren is made up of 58% homeowners, which makes it the 7th lowest community for homeownership in the state of Rhode Island, and is tied for 7th with the town of North Providence, and which is well below the state average of 62% for homeownership. So I think to frame sort of the importance of this homeownership opportunity for people who live either in Warren or in surrounding communities and support Warren through being employees in the town or whatever the case may be. So as proposed, this project seeks to build 3 1-bedroom units and 4 2-bedroom units, I believe. The price points at 80% AMI. Means for a 1-person household to be eligible for this unit, their income couldn't exceed $57,350. For a 2-person household, $65,500, and for a 3-person, $73,550. So the pricing of these units actually very much aligns to the housing needs of people in Warren, in that it tracks very close to your median income. And the first goal that's articulated in your housing section of your 2023 draft comprehensive permit, the first goal, and I will assume the goals are listed in order of importance, is to meet the needs of town residents for affordable and attainable housing to support the socioeconomic diversity of the community. So this project, I think, is one way that you can meet the needs of town residents. A 1-bedroom unit at 80% affordability, and this is subject to change based on interest rates, but in today's market would price somewhere around $175,000. That would be the sales price of a 1-bedroom unit. A 2-bedroom unit would price at 253. If interest rates continue to rise as they have been, we would see those prices come down even further because more of an eligible household's income would need to go to paying interest as opposed to paying principal. So in theory, as the market gets worse, these units will actually become lower priced for people. I wouldn't say they get more affordable because they're spending a different amount on interest. So that would be a disingenuous comment. But price point wise, right, interest rates would change over time. Potentially somebody could refinance and that person would still be in for a lower housing cost than anything that can get produced in the town of Warren. Remember, $410,000 is the median home price here. As far as process goes, I think we try to make it simple, but it is somewhat of an invasive process, and it requires a lot of effort from the applicants. We collect, so somebody would be interested, they would make an offer, they would need to either be able to demonstrate that they have the cash to purchase the unit, which would have to be traceable, of course. The typical buyer is not a cash buyer for us. The typical buyer is a mortgage holder. And one that is mortgaging, you know, almost everything they can to make these things work for themselves. So they would apply with us. We review their household formation. We're looking for all sources of income for all persons who reside in that unit and would be residing in that unit. We're looking at their assets and we're making a determination whether based on their household size, they meet this 80% threshold. Assuming that goes well, they'll get a preliminary approval from us. We work through with the town to try to get to a closing. The town is a party to this deed restriction. They take a home buyer education class. That's a requirement for us. So we are asking people to participate in 8 hours of a HUD approved housing counseling program to ensure not all of them are first time home buyers, but a good number of them are, is that they understand sort of the components of being a homeowner, what to be mindful of, how to budget, you know, for expenses that are potentially going to come down the road. Although we don't tend to see those expenses immediately on new construction, but things happen. And then we'll work towards a closing. And on the day of closing, they'll sign a deed restriction. That deed restriction is a contract effectively between us as the monitoring agent, the seller, the buyer, and the town. And whatever the terms of that deed restriction are, whether it's a 30-year deed restriction or if it's some longer period of time, it's required to be 30 years under state law, gets executed and recorded as part of that closing. And going forward, what that means is that every time that homeowner is interested in refinancing that property and taking, you know, equity out of the transaction, we are involved to make sure that they are not taking more equity out than they could actually resell the property for if they needed to resell it, so that we're really able to preserve these units. If they wish to sell the property, they would sell the property. We would set the maximum sales price at that point in time, and they would sell it to another low-income buyer, and that buyer would go through the same process. So there's a long-standing component about, it's not just enough to bring these units online, but we take the task of the monitoring work and ensuring that the people who were meant to be served by these units are in fact served by those units. Homeownership units must be homeownership. They can never be rented out. So if somebody comes in and wants to buy one and the unit no longer works for them in the future, this is not an investment opportunity. That unit must be sold to another low-income buyer through the process I've described. So it isn't, you know, I've been able to get a cheap mortgage and I'm going to capital, because on that, we really look to preserve those units into the future. And with each transaction, that deed restriction renews. So it's not a transferable, you know, you did 5 years and you did 5 years. It's renewing on each transfer. Everyone needs to survive their own deed restriction. So in theory, the way people hold homes today, it is very possible that you would have a deed restriction that runs for a much longer period of time than 30 years, unless somebody owned it for 30 years in one day, then they would be rid of the deed restriction. But that's not how people own homes. Most people in our portfolio transfer the property, you know, on average by 6 or 7 years is our pretty typical turnaround time. So, and they move on to market rate units, and that unit becomes available to another low-income buyer. So I'm happy to answer any questions should you have them, but
Yeah, thank you.
yes. You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I think at this point in time, we'll hold for questions from the boards if you have them for John and Ron to be able to answer. I think that is the gist of their presentation. You have the package and the details in your package and the plan that's been provided. So rather than,
Okay, what I'm gonna do is have the members start down with Mr. Atwood and go the length of the dais. Any questions or concerns that you have, starting with Matt?
One question. So on the 7 affordable units, as if I got that right, 3 1-bed units, 4 2-bed units, so it's 11 bedrooms overall.
that is correct.
So, correct. And then how many bedrooms are in the balance of those?
You have the bedroom.
I'm gonna have the same question. How many total bedrooms in this project, including the new and the existing and the proposed building?
The 43 is the number.
43 is the number?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Anything else, Matt?
No,
No rush.
I didn't catch when you were talking about the increase in terms of the runoff because of the reduction of asphalt. What's like the percentage of?
So, yeah, I mean, I can elaborate on that. So what I meant on that is there's a reduction in the runoff rate itself. So currently, right now, a majority of the site, well, we have an existing roof from Liberty Street School, and the majority of it is all asphalt.
Yeah.
Something that's in place.
I was tracking with all that. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Like numbers on these.
So while the decrease in the runoff rate itself, so it's from an engineering standpoint of view, is right now there is zero treatment. So we're proposing an underground infiltration system to reduce that rate of runoff. So it's going to capture and collect that stormwater runoff from the property and recharge it and infiltrate it back into the ground surface. So then it results in a net decrease in runoff from the surrounding properties. And again, if this project's not there today, if we went out there in a rainstorm right now, it's all running off onto neighboring properties and into Liberty Street. With this project, even though we're proposing a new roof, we're adding in an additional drainage system to collect what is there running off now. And it's untreated, we call it, or uncontrolled is the word. So now we're kind of controlling that runoff in an underground system. It's a storm tech underground infiltration.
Okay. And then the total, I know you said most of the area
Mhm.
is paved right now.
Yep.
When I look at it, I see parts that say heavily wooded. You have a percentage of how much of the plot is paved right now and then how much of it will be?
So again, a large majority, about 8% is paved. And then the 20% in the woods, there is some remnants of some asphalt as well. We didn't do any further investigation into the wooded areas, but again, a lot of that remnants is some reclaimed asphalt back there. Maybe at one time it was paved, or it was disturbed, but it's all kind of, small underbrush, if you will, on that little dog leg off to the southeast, so the bottom right-hand side of the page. So there isn't really much mature vegetation there, which means that it was disturbed at one time. And we do have some remnants of some disturbed soil, so it doesn't really infiltrate as it should in a pristine wooded area.
Okay, well, one last question, which is in the proposed, with the 2 buildings.
Yep.
It's hard for me to discern what's paved and what's unpaved there. What is you said 80%, is it?
So existing conditions you're talking about?
Yeah,
So-
then when you, in the new conditions, is it 80% still that's?
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah, it'd be a little bit less than that because now we have a roof, but impervious area, yes. I'd have to look at I can look at the lot coverage, yeah, it's about the same.
I don't have any other questions right now, thanks.
Ashley?
What are so we got the estimate on the affordable units, but what is the market rate for the rest of the units?
John, what is the anticipated market rate for the market rate units?
Like the market rate on the one bedroom, the one bedroom units is two proposed right now, last time we filled out this form was 249. And the markets on the two bedrooms, there was two different sizes, one would be 349, the other one was 449.
I'm assuming that's based on the square footage,
The percent.
the difference between the two.
Some of the units in the Liberty existing might wind up being a little bit larger just by design, but just the way they lay out.
Actually,
Is it okay if I ask for like, what are all the variances? Just because there was just so much information, it's like overwhelming and looking at these pictures and things, I'd just like to know very clearly.
specific
that-
variances being
Yeah,
requested.
For the, yeah, and just, I mean, we're looking at this picture, there's a lot of going on, we had a 150-page packet. I'd just like to kind of just get a layout of what's actually being asked
So
for.
it's helpful as we've talked about in prior applications, when we receive these packages. You know, we have architectural drawings, those are very helpful. It appears as in this case that the variance and the relief requests are contained on the drawings themselves. I understand that's normal procedure for these types of drawings, but it's very helpful to extract that information in a summary fashion with maybe a cover letter and include information like total number of bedrooms, things that might not be pro forma for a architectural drawing or another plan, because you know, again, we're trying to digest this information, so.
I understand in the
Yeah.
planner's report on page 13, the planner's report. There is a list of the variances being requested.
That's from the technical review committee that was held 2 weeks ago.
Do you know the page on the PDF? It was 100.
It's at the end of the PDF. It's like 111.
I'm up from there. Almost the last page. And all I did was regurgitate what's up there.
If you'd like, I can read them all.
That'd be great, actually.
Okay, the variance request for rear yard setback. At the back of the new building is a 20-foot standard. We're asking for a 10-foot setback. The fire chief has already testified in TRC that that's adequate for him to be able to access all floors of the building. The request for variance for the proposed structure being 15 feet from a residential zone. We're providing 10, so it's a 5-foot request. The variance requesting for building coverage in a village business zone is at 30% maximum. We're at 31.9. We've shrunk the building down to get to that. The building height, 35 feet is your standard throughout the town. The variance is requesting is for 5 feet, 8 inches on the existing building. So obviously, we're not going to do anything with that. The cupola that we're maintaining is not included in that new standards, and a 4-foot, 4.5 inch on the proposed building at the back of the site. Obviously, we're in a village business district, so in essence, we're asking for a use variance from that because it's residential. It's called an apartment complex. They don't have condominiums in your regulations. So we look to the concept of apartment, but these are condominiums. Once again, the special use for the use permit for the site is required. Off-street parking requirement, the variance requested, the standard is 1.5. We're providing 1.08, basically a bit more than one space per unit. The off-street parking requirement variance for interior landscape. We cannot provide interior landscaping on the site, but some minimum will be provided, obviously, behind the new building and adjacent to it. Our total paved area currently is 23,562 square feet, which equals 3.30 plus or minus square feet. The last is the dimensional requirement. Variance requested for minimum lot area. Is the formulation is based upon initially the first 6 units, which will be in the front building, plus the affordable, which is 7th unit, and then the back building, which is all the newer units. The request there is 26,960 square feet of relief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashley, anything else or
Not
Right.
now.
No, thank you.
Tyler? Having been at the DRC, one of the concerns that has been brought up on a number of occasions is the size of the lot and parking. And the parallel parking, we've noted a number of times as the primary parking for some of the units poses an issue potentially for emergency vehicle access, for snow removal, because it would require a level of skill in parking every time someone wants to park in those spots. And at 349, 449, that's a hefty fee to pay for one spot that you have to parallel park in, and could potentially result in issues with emergency vehicles or just other cars coming in. We had talked about the fact that there was some conversations going on with the East Bay Center regarding the purchase of adjacent land through the board DRCs we've sat at. That's been mentioned. Is there anything that has happened with that?
We have reached out to them. We've spoken with a couple of the directors. One of the directors, Greg Dias from East Providence, an attorney, and I know him well. And he says the problem is that some of the land and the deed restrictions that they required the property on limit what they are able and can do. It's not a quick, easy solution for us to go out and say to our neighbor, Mr. Masson, say, hey, Fred, you're not using this part of your land. It looks fairly derelict. Would you mind selling us a chunk? They're not necessarily able to do that. We can approach them. We have approached them. We've been doing it actually since April, trying to get it moved forward, starting initially with the ground maintenance, the overall maintenance gentleman. We then, had researched who's on this board in case we were just bumping into a person who says, that looks like more work for me. And I don't think that was the case at all, but we reached out to members of the board, and that's sort of what we're up against at this point. We have, in good faith and due diligence, been trying to reach that, and we continue to do so, but I don't think it's an element that can limit this project. In terms of parallel parking, the more you do, the better you get at it, quite candidly. And people parallel park on Main Street all the time, and they succeed in doing it quite well. That's
Again, on that matter, it is how many units you want to fit within that space that determines the amount of parking that's required, necessitating the parallel parking. And while I understand people parallel park on Main Street, they're not limited in terms of there's only 2 feet on either side of the emergency vehicles coming in. So we're talking about, it's not really an apples to apples comparison to say people parallel park on Main Street, because there's a lot more space that an emergency vehicle or snowplow can go through. And as we said as well, removing the snow in times of a big storm would become fairly difficult if you first have to shovel out the cars and then you have to bring the plow in, or you bring the plow in and then you have to shovel out the cars. So I'm sorry, can't, I will have a chance. So that is, it's really a matter of scale. The size of the proposed development compared to the available land on the development. So that's my concern.
Fred, I'm sorry, the one thing I think, besides the parallel parking, we have 44 bedrooms and 28 parking spots. And then I just noticed that Liberty is not, there's no street parking on Liberty. So I think overall, that's a huge concern.
Well, it's 27 plus one handicap, correct?
Well, it's 28 parking and that's per apartment. It's not, my understanding is the parking is not based on bedrooms. It's
No,
based on,
It kind of comes out in the wash. It's like, I think there's 44 beds, 43 bedrooms if it.
it's
you're going to
28.
zone- Yeah,
28 is actually the meeting the requirement.
Well, no,
No,
no, it's
no, it's-
37 and a half is required.
required.
Though they're looking for a reduction of 10 and a half to 27 plus one handicap spot.
Our regulations require 1.5 spots per unit. They're requesting a waiver such that it's 1.08 spots per unit. And just a reminder, the new law that starts in January brings it down to 1 parking spot per unit.
Yeah, that's
In
what I
terms
was
of the new
referring to.
comprehensive
Sorry, I was on the TRC. That's what we're looking at, because this is a comprehensive permit as opposed to a general request. It's brought down to 1 parking spot per unit. Not that that's an ideal situation, but again, you know, in some ways, we're being forced by this onerous comprehensive permit, which becomes worse and worse as time goes on. But that's for another day.
So, Fred,
So I'm done.
are we going to go over the TRC's report in detail or not?
For now, at this point, I was kind of hoping that everybody had read it.
I have.
And again, if there's a question specific to it,
Well, actually, my question was, read this site plan, where would the East Bay property be? Can somebody just?
To the
It is in the south, rather the eastern side. You
On
see
the
the dotted,
eastern side?
yeah, where the Compass Rose is there,
Okay,
that's their land.
where that arrow is.
so
What we're hoping, we're trying to,
I know you're trying, but clearly that would resolve a lot of issues regarding this proposal, so trying is good, but it seems to me that if you're going to eliminate barriers here, you need to succeed. So I have a couple other questions. What is the affordable, you quoted the rates for market. What are the condominiums going to cost on an affordable basis, please?
and Belinda can give that to you.
So the 1 bedroom is 175 at present. These things change over time.
I get that,
And 2-bedroom unit is 253.
253, thank you. The other question I have is regarding the trees. As presented, it's that they're not healthy. Is also the fact that they inhibit the parking possible?
Not the parking, but the life safety issue of fire trucks getting in and out, the turning radiuses of the life safety vehicles coming in past those vehicles. Actually,
Is that-
Mr. Principe can speak better to
Is
that
that-
than I.
I mean, I was there today and I saw the egress and the entry and things. Is it the turning radius off of Liberty Street that's the
Yes,
problem?
exactly. So actually, Herb, can you scroll up on that page? If you can see the top, there you go. If you put your cursor on that, there's a dark, see the radius there? Those are the turning radius of the emergency vehicles. If you look at the Linden Tree right there, that turning radius is in the way of that, one of those trees as well. So actually, the chief had recommended to remove that for safety purposes.
How about the other one, the one on the right?
So again, I mean, that canopy is a little bit bigger than what it's shown if we measure it. And that would also be in the way of that turning radius as well, which they need to
Really?
keep it clear.
You know, the chief,
Chief,
the fire
Recommended
chief
that.
did look at that, understood the concerns and made it clear that, it would take a serious pruning job and essentially destroy the tree to create the
Correct.
turning radius.
Thank you. Okay.
I think that my main concern is with these variances, these waivers that they're asking, the minimum distance from the rear to the abutting properties and things like that. I'm a little concerned how the community feels about that. and how that's going to impact that area of town.
One thing that we may want to look at some point, we can talk about this later, would be site visit. Because when you go, it's one thing to look at it on paper, it's another to see where exactly these buildings, the limits would fall to, so that it's clear exactly what that variance
Correct. That would
is,
help.
with the
The
consequences.
markings on the ground, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So one quick question, the fence that's in the back is on the property line.
Yeah, that is correct. The perimeter fencing that has existed is in fact perimeter
And the same is true
on all sides.
on all sides. The fence is the property line.
That is correct.
okay, so I'd like to open this as a public meeting. Do we have to have a motion for that then? I'd like to make a motion to open this meeting to public comment. Do I have a second? Matt?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Again, what I'd ask is that you come up, be as short and pithy as possible, but I know this is an issue close to many of your hearts and minds, so we could have the first person. And you need to identify yourself, come up to you need to come up to the microphone and give your name, address.
So, my name is Frank Aldi from 33 Miller Street, which is adjacent in part by Authorized Enterprises on the west end. Are you going to make the financials and the numbers available to all of us, or how does that work?
We need to provide a pro forma.
So basically, Rhode Island general law requires that the applicant submit a financial pro forma. The document is essential for this board to examine if the amount of density they're requesting supports the project in terms of the balancing as to extra units versus making it financially feasible. And I have not seen a financial pro forma.
Gotcha. So that is coming though.
It's a requirement under Rhode Island general law.
Gotcha.
And it is an impediment to us making a decision
Okay.
tonight without that in hand.
Understood. Okay. Got a few more other questions a little down the road, but
Okay.
that's kind of important.
Anyone else? Wow. Davison?
Evening, members of the board. I've been away, so I haven't had a lot of time to make copies and stuff. I wrote it. I'm sorry, Dave Bolster, 53 State Street. I made a few copies of the letter I'm going to read, which is only one page. And I have one copy of this little packet of information about the building and the architect, which you can have.
Yeah, I've received.
Is this part of the packet?
Did we get,
Well,
this is the letter in the packet already?
I don't think so.
No, okay, it's a different.
we got it at the TRC.
Yeah,
Is it-
honestly, most of these comments are not new, unfortunately. So members of the planning board, the same fundamental concerns persist about this proposed development since the first technical review committee meeting 8 months ago. The new building is too big for the site, creating too much demand for parking and asphalt, and should not be larger than the school. The amount of asphalt and parking should be reduced to provide green space in the front and rear of the building for residents and the environment. The proposed parking along the west fence threatens clear access for emergency vehicles. The two massive healthy linden trees in the front should be preserved. The rear building was to have one central entrance that would be visible from the street. So just to highlight each of those a little bit. Number one, scale. Due to the architectural significance of the Liberty Street School and its renowned architect Thomas Teft, the U.S. Secretary of Interior Historic Standards state that the new building should not be larger than this prominent school. In 8 months of talks, the proposed new building has only been reduced by 10%, and it needs to be reduced by a further 20% to be compatible with the school and the site. Number two, green space. The proposed new building demands more asphalt coverage, eliminating any usable green space. The asphalt in front of the school should be returned to a front yard, and some green space should be provided for residents in the rear as well. Number 3, access. The proposed new building demands too much parking, including the parallel parking along the west fence, which could easily block access for emergency vehicles. Number 4, trees. The 2 enormous and healthy linden trees in front, which we have documented by professionals, in front of the school should be preserved. They would benefit from some pruning, but it would take 100 sapling trees to equal what these 2 trees are doing for Warren's environment every day. Large urban trees are less common than in the past, so they are vital to the built environment and the quality of life for all residents. Number 5, entry. Keeping the new building no larger than the school would allow for one entrance and focal point as an architectural feature and be visible from the street. The proposed building is so large that there are now 2 entrances, and neither would be clearly visible from the street. One would be hidden behind the school, and the other one would be hidden behind the neighbor's fence. So just in summary, a second building of this scale on this site is untenable, potentially putting at risk those who live there and around it, as well as compromising the environment and the quality of life for all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. No, please don't. Yes.
Good evening, Chair and Board.
Can you
I am
identify-
Charles Staton, licensed arborist, Rhode Island Tree Steward, and Chairman of the Tree Commission. Also owner of a landscaping company for the last 45 years. The Tree Commission and many people who have requested that we are here tonight to help save the linden trees. Trees in general help the town of Warren by providing the benefits of taking in carbon dioxide and giving off oxygen. They also cool the atmosphere by providing the shade. The roots absorb water, excess water, and sometimes oil and gasoline, thus reducing the stress on the Warren sewer plant. And they also provide a habitat for animals, a wildlife habitat. And lastly, and most importantly, there's an emotional connection to the trees. And in this last point, these trees on Liberty Street really are part of the neighborhood, are part of the atmosphere, are part of the feeling. And if they come down, it's going to change the emotional well-being of the neighborhood. So we feel that everything that can be done should be done to save the trees. Now, tonight I've heard a few things that are incorrect. First of all, the turning radius that was mentioned is correct. I did meet with the fire chief. But the linden tree on the west is not within the turning radius. And we prune trees every single day of the week. And those trees on Linden Street, I've been there on Liberty Street, I'm sorry. I've been there many times. They could easily be pruned to be productive, healthy, long-living trees and still not block any access for any vehicle, The asphalt around the base of the trees could safely be removed. In fact, that's something that we do when we work for landscape architects. Could safely be removed, so they would not jeopardize the tree. So I'm just asking that everything that can be done is done to save the linden trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Staton.
May I ask?
No, actually, we got.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, I'm Michelle Murray from 41 Dyer Street. I'm a member of the Tree Commission and a tree steward as well. A bit of the background on why Chuck and Kathleen and I are here. According to the town charter, and I paraphrase, take into account the importance of trees to environmental quality, public health, energy conservation, and community character. The Tree Commission shall maintain a long-term plan for the protection, care, removal, and replacement of trees in the town. And taking into account the need to carefully coordinate tree management with proposed development, the tree commission shall develop guidance for the planning board and property owners regarding their trees. So that's why we're here. As Chuck mentioned, one of the important functions of trees is capturing greenhouse gases, which contribute to global warming. Now, the linden trees at Liberty Street are among the most efficient species in doing this. They capture 65 pounds of greenhouse gases a year. They're also, linden trees are also one of the longest lived species, which contributes to their efficiency. And they have large leaves, which once again contributes to that, that function. Now, trees don't achieve their maximum ability to capture greenhouse gases until they're about 70 years old. So to say, oh, we'll cut these down and put some new ones in, you won't get that effect for 70 years until well into the next century, Finally, if you approach the question about turning radius and such as, I need to get a fire truck through here, how do I do it? You get a very different answer than if you ask, there are these two important trees here. What do I need to do to get a fire truck through here? It's a question of how you approach the problem. One more point. Let's say you plant brand new trees here. It's analogous to if you borrow $100 from someone and they give you a savings bond that matures in 70 years. Have they paid you back? It's not equivalent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Pannoni. I too am a member of the Warren Tree Commission, have been for 20-something years. And I've seen this fight for keeping the trees, public trees, for years and years and years. I'm hoping you'll consider the tree much more than just a plant, in that it does make a lot of contributions to our environment and the aesthetics and the emotional well-being for the people of this town. And I have one other thing to say. Every time I hear about the trees coming down and the lack of landscaping being planned for this project, it just reminds me of the song that says they paved paradise and they put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ethan DuPont from 11 Liberty Street. I think the board did a good job of realizing the variances in the project relief that they're searching for and the amount of them, from the parking to the drainage to the setbacks. But I think the one aspect of these variances that we didn't discuss is coming from the ordinance that the hardship cannot be the result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize financial gain. So I think it would be beneficial if the applicant could describe to everybody in the room why these hardships, they're seeking relief from them other than financial gain. Keep it short and sweet.
Thank you. Part of that would be the pro forma in part.
Right, Mr. Chair, also just to clarify on that point is the resident just talked about the standards for a zoning variance. That's not the same standard that the board applies when giving a waiver or / variance under the comprehensive permit application. That standard is not part of your purview.
That's unfortunate. again, one of the problems with the comprehensive permit, which is essentially hamstringing us in Warren and towns throughout the state. And this is an issue of grave importance, not only for this issue, not only for this proposal, but for a whole host of future proposals until that legislation is changed.
Hello, Mark Dobbin, 22 Liberty Street, directly adjacent to the proposed site. Very much of two minds about this. I'm aware that there's a housing issue in Warren. I'm aware that there's a housing issue in the state. I'm aware there's a housing issue in the country. I don't want to, and I won't be the guy who NIMBYs a project just because it is literally in my backyard. So I won't be a not in my backyard guy. On the other hand, the comprehensive permit basically allows developers to run roughshod over you folks and also over all of us and our concerns by allowing them to disregard basically all the variances that they're going to be breaking. So where's the middle ground? They're proposing what is pretty clearly an overly large development for the site. I think everyone understands that. They don't have the parking that they need really. And just if you picture, it's hard to picture 25 units on that lot. If you look at it, if you go out in my backyard and look at it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So what recourse do you all have? You can reject their proposal and that forces them to go to the state and appeal, if I understand correctly, which is going to cost them time and money. And developers don't like to spend time and money because time is money. So maybe there's a middle ground where we convince the developers to build something that's slightly more in line with what is appropriate for the space. And then you guys give and say, hey, sure, a couple of these variances, we're welcome to work with you on that. And maybe it ends up being 7 units in the school and I don't know, 8 behind, 10 behind, 12 behind. I'm not sure what the right size is. This isn't my field. But I think that's the card that you all have to play, is the threat of a denial and send them to the state with God knows how long that'll take and whether or not they'll ever get approved. So I just hope that you'll play that card. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Keegan. I live at 15 Liberty Street, directly across, and I would hate to lose the trees. It shades my house. My main problem is with all the traffic on Liberty Street as it is now, with all the development on Water Street. It's become a cross street. There's no parking for the people who live in the area who don't have off-street parking. So where's all these cars gonna go to park in the neighborhood? I mean, you got, what'd you say, 28 parking spots? I mean, you gotta figure, if there's 2 people in the apartment, there's gonna be 2 cars. That's my main problem. And it's just too congested down there now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the board, my name is John Mensinger. I live at 67 Water Street. I'd just like to say that affordable housing initiatives are really the only way that people of median income levels can get started on a path to home ownership. And I believe that home ownership is an important path for an opportunity for people in our town. I believe that income diversity is a benefit to the town, and that small, lower cost condo units will attract first-time buyers, working couples, maybe downsizing seniors, teachers, and so on. You've heard that from other speakers. New housing is a community benefit, and I think that new neighbors are a community asset. I want to extend that opportunity to people. We've heard about the numbers about the median income versus affordability. I won't go into those details, but I would just like to express that subject to the conditions, I thought the TRC report and the staff report was extremely comprehensive, listed dozen and a half perhaps conditions that might be considered to be placed on this project. But it did conclude that if those conditions were met, that the project is in fact consistent with the comprehensive plan and represents no significant negative impact to health and safety. So that's important. So if those conditions, I'm thrilled that the school can be saved. It's been sitting there derelict for a while and could stay that way. Subject to the condition of the public safety issues and the preservation and restoration of the school, I'd express my full support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Pat Muse, 47 Broad Street. Two things. One, I know there's been a discussion about putting trees on at Burrs Hill. Trees on Burrs Hill do not give shade to Liberty Street. That's my first comment. The second one is, I'm a little confused about the financials aren't here. I thought the financials had to be here. And since we aren't going to see them tonight, will there be another public hearing after those financials are presented? Since that seems to me to be an important part of the whole discussion.
Based on legal concerns raised by the town solicitor, yes, in answer to your question, we will be extending this public hearing in light of the need for those financial pro formas, and those would be made available to the public at the meeting prior to any decision being made by the planning board.
And is there anywhere where we're told what the ROI can be on affordable housing?
Basically, there's not a black and white answer to that. It's whether or not the project is feasible.
I'm sorry,
Whether or not the project is financially feasible is the baseline.
So the ROIs on the affordable housing, there isn't one?
It's looked at as a whole in terms of an applicant has the right to make profit. However, it's got to be weighed versus the density.
And is there a statement of what that profit can be?
It's case by case. It depends on the project, the site, how many units, how many affordable units. And again, that's something that is required in the first stage of an application. And everything is listed in terms of expenses, profits, et cetera. So everybody's well aware of exactly what the financial feasibility of this project is.
But there's no rule, there's no law that says on affordable housing, you can only make this return on investment.
That's a question for the board to ask the applicant. If they think in their opinion that it's outrageous versus something that is reasonable.
But there's no numbers.
There's no black and white.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay.
So my name is Joan Coltrane. Can you hear me? I live at 1 Stonegate Road in Warren. And I sat through 3 or 4 of the TRCs, and I was happy to be here for this meeting. It seems fairly clear to me that obviously the size of the proposed building is out of keeping with the neighborhood and presents a concern for the board, presents a concern for neighbors. I understand the developer needs to make a profit. They're in the business of building residential units. But it does seem to me that a compromise could be reached. Is it possible to reduce the size of the new building by 1/3 perhaps? Build perhaps high-end units in that building, increasing the profitability per unit and still maintain 25% affordable? I am not at all opposed to affordable housing. I think it's needed, but I don't think it should be used to leverage a proposal that's out of scale for our neighborhoods, for our historic neighborhoods. And I think that's a sentiment that has been expressed over and over again. So I think I would ask the developer, is there a way to reduce the size of the proposed building, still have it be profitable and require fewer parking? Ashley Medeiros raised the question about 44 bedrooms, or noted that there were going to be 44 bedrooms. I realize that parking isn't scaled relative to bedrooms, but 44 bedrooms suggest there will be more than 28 vehicles that need to park on that site. I mean, it's just, it's the elephant in the room, no pun intended. Where are those people? Where will that parking take place? How will snow removal be complete on heavy snow days if people are parallel parked along the fence? How can we ensure access by emergency vehicles? These aren't questions that are new. They've come up over and over again. So it just seems to me that it would be reasonable for the developers to reconsider the scale of the building they're proposing and still maintain a profitable pro forma, profitable project, and still include affordable housing in that project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, Mary Hill in Norbert Street. I just want to second a lot of what you're hearing here tonight and the concerns that you raised. I think it's highly likely that 25 units equals 35 cars, and the math really just doesn't work, and those cars have to go somewhere. And I'm concerned about the flow of traffic down that very narrow street. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Jason Reno, 21 Miller Street. I'm that guy. So, Mr. Chair, I'll beg your indulgence. This may take a little more than 3 minutes. There are a couple of things that I think we should probably discuss. One, I mean, the number of trips generated by a facility like this, ultimately speaking, the engineers will decide that based on an established set of standards, because standards are great. Everybody uses standards. Standards allow for design processes to be nice and straightforward. You get a very simple answer and it's easy to understand. The problem is standards do not necessarily take into account occupancy. We're talking about a facility that is ultimately a large number of residential units, less than 800 square feet. You're not going to put 2 parents and 3 kids in that sort of a small environment. The most likely people that would occupy these kinds of units are the same kind of people that would occupy the apartments at Tourister Mills. They're dual income, no children. And based on the fact that we're talking about 2-bedroom apartments between $350,000 and $450,000, it's going to take both of those people working every day, 40 hours a week, to afford that mortgage. So odds are both of those people are leaving in the morning and both of those people are coming home at night. Second, do we know what the condo fees are for this property? Because we're talking about maintaining in perpetuity a 120-plus-year-old building on communal condominium fees that are going to have to be, essentially paid out to the community chest to be able to maintain and provide for this building going forward. And that is a cost that these residents need to pay in addition to their monthly mortgage. I can tell you from personal experience, having lived with my wife in a renovated early 1900s condominium complex in downtown Providence, it is not easy to pay condo fees on a building that is that old. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of cost. The roofs have to be fixed. Buildings like that leak. In no way, shape, or form speaking against the construction methods to be used here. Old buildings are old. They take money. They take time. That being said, full disclosure, the applicant's counsel and I have spoken on a couple of occasions, and I will say, I think the idea of this is fantastic. Somebody has to do something with Liberty Street. The building is too beautiful. It needs to be rehabbed. It needs to be used. And I can completely understand and appreciate the idea of adding density on what is a relatively large plot of land for this particular neighborhood. I can appreciate the idea of making the best use of that land under the circumstances. That being said, as you can imagine, I have concerns. I have an 8-year-old. She plays in the backyard. We're now talking about having no less than 6 residential units with their windows looking into my backyard from only the top 2 floors of the second building to be built in the back of this property. I am concerned, very concerned, about the vegetation along my fence line. The latest set of plans show that they're talking about a 7-foot below grade basement to this property. And for anyone who's ever built anything, a 7-foot basement doesn't fit in a 7-foot hole. You're talking about a 10-foot, 12-foot deep hole, and you're talking about a hole that's going to come within 3 to 5 feet of that property line. This level of commercial earthwork will kill every living thing on my property line, including a row of lilacs that is well over 100 years old. I have concerns. The latest set of plans shows a dumpster enclosure on the south fence, which causes 2 problems. One, not exactly thrilled about my daughter using her saucer swing, which hangs off the large maple tree or oak tree that sits on the southwest corner of this particular property, less than 3 feet from a dumpster enclosure. But I'm also concerned about the fact that that dumpster enclosure removes the only transparency that we would have left to Liberty Street. There is then no way to see through to Liberty Street from Miller Street. I don't necessarily know that the plans are developed far enough to actually be able to sort of understand what's going to be going on the south side of the building. Currently, the building is shown as being set 10 feet off the south property line. The elevations and plans to the building also show 2 major egresses to the south of that property, to the south of that building. My concern is that egress implies hardscape. And what the current site plan is showing is a vegetated area south of that building. You're not going to have 2 major fire egresses dumping out onto a grass area at the back of the building that odds are isn't going to get maintained the same as everything else on the property. So my concern is, are we actually talking about a 3 to 4 foot wide walkway, sidewalk of some kind that needs to be south of that building to facilitate egress and facilitate the use of those 2 southerly exits to the building? And ultimately speaking, I think from a purely aesthetic standpoint, I think my biggest concern is really the mass of the building. Make no mistake, it is a very nice looking building. It looks great on paper. In no uncertain terms, we're building a 39-foot tall by 112-foot long wall, 10 feet off my property line. There are other design options available for a property like this that could potentially take into account a lot of the concerns that have been made tonight. And I think that they are worth investigating to come to a mutually agreeable and mutually beneficial use of this property that can serve everyone involved. But I'm not necessarily sure that what we're seeing on paper right now is it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any hands.
Just one
And
final.
you need to re-identify yourself for the sake of the.
Oh, sure. Frank Aldi on the western side of 33 Miller Street. What Jason just referred to, namely that the vegetation along his property line is most likely going to be impacted severely, also pertains not because of the hole that is being dug, but for the room that needs to be made for all these big service vehicles, for emergency trucks along the property line of Kerry Cronin. she's got 3 gigantic trees there that are, I don't know how old, but at least over 100 years, and they will be also, you know, severely impacted because they need to be cut. If you look at them, they're all leaning onto the schoolhouse, and so what happens to those trees? They will be equally impacted. I think there's at least 3, maybe 4 giant trees on the northern west side of the property. So I think we need to consider all of that as well, the environmental impact. Not just along the south side, but also the west side.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. Good.
Hi, my name is Sarah Weed. I live at 23 Bridge Street. I have 3 points I want to make. One is I'm worried about the HOAs from the homeowner's perspective. And I wonder how the monitoring agency figures that in whether the homeowner can afford that house, that condo.
We're not going to have them respond right now. You can just state you're not going to get a response.
Okay. The other thing is I'm worried about the utilities. Are they going to fit under the roofs of both these buildings? And, oh, so I'm not going to get a response.
No, well, you may after, you know, we turn it over.
And the other thing is, all of these variances prove that this just does not make sense. The reason those ordinances and regulations are put in is because we're trying to do something that makes a lot of sense. So I just think the developers do not have common sense in terms of how this project should be done.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We are not going to close the public hearing. Based on what we've heard, any comments from the board, Matt? Beyond what?
Didn't know I was gonna get asked.
And we're done. Now with the planning. No, sorry, it wasn't good. Go ahead.
I think for me, I am also interested in how those HOA fees do play into.
Ashley, can you speak into they're not going to be able to hear you.
I am just interested in how those HOA fees do go into that affordability, because, you know, they are $400 or $500 a month. That's, I would assume, cost. Is that included in that 30% of, if you can, I mean, I don't know if you can, it'd be good to respond to that. Okay.
Sure. So yes, the HOA fees are included according to the paperwork that was submitted for the letter of eligibility. They're estimated at $150 a month. And so I think the best way to explain how we come up with pricing, it's not based on the actual buyer, simply because we don't know who the buyer is when we're setting a price. And in order to have consistency, we need to be able to have some level of predictability. So every time we calculate, we'll calculate using the same inputs at that point in time. So if you were to think of affordability as, say, a pie, right? And so the whole pie is total housing cost, which is affordable to this household that we determine based on the AMI targets, the maximum income allowable at that target. So let's just say, for easy math, the pie is a $2,000 pie. So we're going to carve up this pie into slices. So there is a slice of pie that goes to condo fee, right? So 2,000 minus 150. There's a slice of pie that goes to taxes based on what we know to be the tax rate and what we believe to be the assessed value at completion. So that's another chunk. Condo fee, taxes, homeowners insurance, if it was single family, there is a condo sort of insurance level, so that's a smaller slice of pie. PMI, so irregardless of who the buyer is, we assume a certain level of down payment and we assume a certain credit rating in order to get to standard rates. So there's a slice of pie for private mortgage insurance. And so once you slice off all of those pieces, what is left is a slice of pie that constitutes principal and interest payment. So obviously the slice of that slice that is to interest is variable. And so what really ultimately remains is the principal reduction component. And it's really the only flexible piece of pie. So as the other pieces shift around, it eats into or expands that principal component. So, you know, what it looks like today, say fast forward in 5 years, what it looks like for that homeowner will be really conditioned on those inputs at that point in time, right? But we're calculating today, those prices I gave you are predicated on today's interest rate, today's tax rate, and a condo fee of $150 per month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, not yet. I mean, that's right. No. Well, okay, but I mean, you know, this is why I said, are there any hands? No, that's not allowed, because we're going through the planning board right now, so if you can,
The applicant has their right to respond to the planning.
right,
Oh, sorry.
okay.
Yeah,
Actually, anything else?
could I just give my feedback?
I'm sorry.
Am I allowed to just give my feedback on the whole thing of like what some of my concerns are continuing to be as?
No, I
we
mean,
look
if
to-
we're basing it on what we've already said. Is there anything that the public has said that would increase your concern or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And so I understand where Rhode Island Housing is with the 28 parking spots, but I feel like that should only account for the 7 spots that are affordable and not the rest of the units, because it is true at $450,000 home for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, that's a lot of money. And so you are going to have 2 people. And let's be honest, those 2 people aren't going to be working at the jobs, most jobs here in Warren, those 2 people are going to be working outside. And it's not so much it's not like we have a really consistent busing. And so I think the parking and combined with the fact that the street doesn't have any parking on it. So it's a double there. Yeah, and I would like to see for abutting properties and, you know, I think in other plans we've seen, the variances don't really, the leeway doesn't affect the immediate neighbor, where these really do. And so there are dumpsters, and I would not love if a dumpster was abutting my property for, you know, and so I think those kind of concerns and looking at, is there a way to make it so the building is that we're not encroaching on other people's property lines, because they've had to be consistent with their developing of their own properties to not encroach. And so I'd really like to see that those things be really considered over all else as well.
I'll just add, I have several concerns.
You're good, Ashley? Okay.
I'll just share a couple of the concerns that, I mean, the bottom line is this is a big building in a small space. The applicant seeking a 27% relief on existing parking regulations. I have serious concerns about the reality of the impact on traffic and the capability of this project to, you know, handle the parking that's going to be required, regardless of, you know, respectful of your comments, regardless of what the income, the job, people are going to have cars. You know, there's 44 bedrooms, there's 25 units, 37 is required. In addition to, you know, 37 is required currently. That's the law we're following. Because that's when the application came in. The new law is not in effect yet. This is going to be a problem. And then the setback is an issue as well. Setbacks are there for a reason. And I think that construction into that area is certainly going to be a concerning impact. Those are my biggest concerns at the time being.
Thank you. Tyler?
Yeah, so with the weighted average parking calculation, I think would make more sense if you rather than doing it at the one spot per unit, at a minimum, if you just did a weighted average calculation based upon the affordable units at this state rate and the non-affordable or expensive units at our zoning level, it would work better, at least for this number of units, I would think. I had another question. The existing structure, I didn't see it. It's probably in here. I just missed it. How tall is it? Is the new one is 40 feet, 39, 40 feet?
No.
Is that's the new?
That's the existing.
So the existing,
Sorry, the existing is 39, but four.
okay, and okay, so the 3-story building
Yeah.
is shorter than the
Yep, it
2-story
is,
building.
and part of the reason for that is the first floor on Liberty Street School is well above grade. So
Okay.
you're already starting higher out of the ground. And the floor to ceiling heights are much larger than is required for residents.
Okay,
So we have more vertical space than is necessary to support 2 floors.
right, okay, all right. And then the other area that I had some concern was from the parking and was the size of the setbacks. I think that it does really press up against adjacent properties, and as someone mentioned regarding the vegetation and just the general standard of life of the adjacent properties are significantly impacted by that.
And my understanding on that setback was that it would be open because the fire chief had indicated that he would have to bring a ladder in to get up to that on that southern facing main immediately adjacent to Ms. Barino's. So it's not a vegetated area. It's in fact an emergency access area. My comments earlier stand a large development in land that is not sufficient to provide, to me, not only the kind of parking that will protect the neighborhood and protect the town, but also be realistic. The town council can plan on people who paid $500,000 almost for a house saying, where am I going to park? This is already an issue in downtown and in that area in particular. I understand that people in the neighborhood are already parking in that parking lot. That doesn't make, we can't use that as the basis for making a determination, but clearly there's a problem that's existent and we don't want to aggravate it significantly. As to the trees, again, love to preserve the trees, and they are beautiful trees. Our understanding was that one of them would have to go, and there's to accommodate the turning radius. My understanding was that the turning radius on the other side would require a level of pruning that was unsustainable. If that's not in fact the case, then that's something that would have to be taken into consideration and could conceivably be a condition. While it would be great to hang on to the two, and that was one of the thoughts that we had at the TRCs in the past about the adjacent land. If you were able to get that adjacent land, the turning radiuses could be different and those trees could be safe. But we can't demand that a developer buy additional land in order to accommodate. So it's not something that's in our power. We can certainly recommend it, and to the credit of the developers, they surfaced that initially, and I know that they've been working on it. So it has been, there has been a level of concern about how we could preserve these trees and also about how we can do the parking. Ultimately, though, our decision will be based on what is in the reality of this proposal. And that's what we'll be determining. We won't be determining it until we have that pro forma, which is essential to this process, because that does give us a sense of what is realistic. Again, our hands are somewhat tied by this onerous comprehensive permit process that was born out of goodwill, but is like the road to hell paved with good intentions. So
one quick question of the architect, what is the facade of the new building?
So the front facade would have a brick veneer.
Brick veneer.
Yeah.
And the other question is, it was mentioned, you said the building was in good shape.
Yes.
What's going to happen if nothing's done with the building?
I mean, if nothing there right now, it's in good shape.
Is the roof adequate? Does the roof keep the rain out?
The cupola does not, but the roof does. So,
Ooh.
I mean, it has wood elements on it, right? So if those are not maintained over time, they will start to decay. It is built out of a good, long-lasting brick. So that's not at risk at this point in time, but, the site is covered in asphalt, and whether or not, it sits there undeveloped, I mean, there's improvements that can be made that would impact the entire community beyond its current state. It will not last forever if it's not maintained.
So how do you respond to the point that the condo fees are going to be expensive because it's an old building?
During this development process, the building is going to be brought up to code for life safety, for materials, for structure, as is required. So sure, is it gonna be more expensive than to maintain a new construction building? Potentially, but it's things that are at all problems now are going to be addressed at this stage of the project. They're not gonna be pushed or deferred to the future. So I think it could be a concern that there'll be issues, but at the same point, it's going to improve what's there and allow it to last much longer than it's actually.
Sure, yeah.
Can you also say what the materials for the other three sides of the building are?
Yeah, sure. So the other three sides are proposed to be clapboards made out of a composite material. There's a couple different options out there. And the main reasoning for that is that they last without a lot of maintenance, better than painted wood at this point. So that is one step that would actually help reduce the maintenance cost of the overall building.
One, and I'm not sure, based on that, the voluntary historic district, I'm not sure what the conditions are that would or would not allow that kind of composite material being used.
Typically, or do you want
Or
to?
which,
It's going to be more of a legal question, but I'm working that out to understand if the new building is indeed subject to that kind of review, given our historic ordinance, because it's not that they're rehabbing, it's not an addition, the new part's not an addition to the old building, it's a separate new building. So the legal question is, can you, under our normal regs that you take on the responsibility of the Volunteer Historic District Committee, be able to talk about the composition of the exterior parts? That's.
I think at the very least, the historic board can give an opinion that the planning board can cooperate as necessary or as they seem fit.
but it would be differentiated from an existing building versus a new building. That was my understanding, that if you're putting up a new building, it's not necessarily held to the same standards.
Correct. However, there's guidance as to that type of development that the historic commission can provide to the planning board.
In general, when we're working with historic buildings, if we're doing an addition connected to the structure, we want it set back from the street. We don't want it in line with the front. And we want it to be of similar materiality and qualities. It doesn't have to be exactly the same,
And in some towns, we actually like to see that you can determine what is original versus what is new. So you preserve that integrity and that kind of specialness of the historic structure itself. So as far as if composite siding would be allowed for new construction, it is a completely new building.
Yeah.
Right, as we're discussing. So it does need further input and recommendation.
Okay. Terry? I'm sorry. Mike?
I wonder if before we're done, could Ben summarize the standards for approval of the comprehensive permit?
Well, we're not going to do that today, are we?
Okay.
Correct. I don't think that the board has the authority to issue a decision today as under Rhode Island General Law 4553-4, 6, where it says that required submissions, a financial pro forma is required. Therefore, without that document, we cannot make a decision tonight.
Terry?
Well, everything that I've heard tonight reinforces my concerns about the variances that we're being asked to approve. You know, the scale of it seems large. The impact to the neighbors is of concern. You know, those houses and those properties, you know, are very expensive properties all around this one. And it would be, I think it would be hard on those homeowners to have their property values negatively impacted to allow this property to go forward. So that's something that, you know, I think is important to the community.
I will note that the 2023 draft comprehensive plan was quoted in terms of affordable housing. Within that same plan, we've also noted the importance of maintaining scale and size within a neighborhood, preserving the neighborhood's look and feel as part of one of the goals of the comprehensive plan. So we want to encourage affordable housing. At the same time, we want to preserve and protect the existing look and feel of a neighborhood. And so those two things don't have to be at odds with each other, but certainly must be taken into consideration. The same way we would take into consideration affordable housing, we would also the scale and style of any building that went in.
There was one thing that actually I thought about after, but I do want to bring
Sure,
up, and
yeah.
it has to do with that. In one of the letters that were sent to us, I think around preservation, the parking spots in the front kind of are like that. Is that a good precedent to set? And we're saying that we want downtown to be a village business district, which is historically doesn't have a setback and usually the aesthetics on the street. And so it's going to be opposite of what we've talked about in the new comp plan and in other areas of the town where you want it to be more welcoming. And does that allow then other people to say like, well, they can park in the front yard. I'm just going to start parking in my grass if I don't have any, you know what I mean? Does that?
Yeah,
set a precedent
no,
that it doesn't
and that
fit the
is part of
neighborhood?
our discussion, you know, and creating, which we're doing concurrently with this process, is creating a new comprehensive plan designed to protect and preserve the character of this town in all of its different styles and its wonder. And that is a factor within this. But again, I think what we have now is a list of concerns, which Herb, I'm sure, has delineated. And we will have that in all seriousness. We will have that list of concerns noted. They will be on the record. Do you, Herb, have anything to say at this point about where we are?
Can I ask one other question that came to me?
Yeah.
The 25 units total, 7 are affordable. What's the split between the existing building? I can't decipher it in the packet.
What is the split?
What are affordable in the, you know, base?
We haven't spread yet.
Yeah.
No, we'll be looking for houses.
Well, I'm not sure I understand. Is the question how many affordables are in the school versus the new building?
Yes.
Okay, the new building, the school will have one affordable unit and the balance will be.
Thank you.
That's the only way it's being feasible. Because as actually has been discussed with Melinda, the housing expert, the single unit affordables are losses, physical financial losses. You cannot build it for what you can get for it. So that's an offset of why the other was profitable. In terms of where are the more expensive units going to be? One would think that will probably be in the school building because you'll have high ceilings, historic building to be in. That only makes sense. And in terms of the condo fees, if the condo fees for affordables are set at 150, then the other burdens are going to be spread amongst the people. Condo fees are not set with any unit, any association that I've been involved with. When you have a variable unit in terms of just a per capita division, it is by the value of your unit, the determination is made. What does your unit have that the other units don't have? More or less bedrooms, different quality, different locations. There's a lot of factors that go into the determination of what condominium fees are. In terms of the parking spaces, they'll be assigned. That's part of the condominium docs. They will be assigned. We've been working on the condominium docs. I laugh. This is a truism. That condominiums have three primary problems: parking, pets, and poop. You know, you can eliminate pets and poop by eliminating pets, but people like to have their dogs and cats. Parking is always an issue in condominiums. It doesn't matter where you are. If you had 3 per unit, people would complain that theirs is a little too close to the door or whatever. I don't care. But this effort has been undertaken by John and Ron because they like the town of Warren. Their gravity here. This is an attempt to try to make it a profitable venture for them. The standard by way is not a profit. It's greater profit. The word greater is oftentimes overlooked in the zoning standard. It's greater profit. The question I have, and I've been hamstrung a little bit here, John has a disability, he has a hearing deficiency. I haven't really been able to communicate with John in this course. Ron seats back. And so that's be a little bit awkward as well. The question I have is, you're obviously saying this is not going to conclude tonight. When we come back before you, are we going to be limited to the pro forma and the issues you have and answering the issues we have? Or are we going to be through, I've got, I think, 5 pages of notes here. Or we're going to be limited to the issues that were brought forward by the public this evening.
I mean, I would assume that Herb is going to share with you the consolidated list. And that would be something that, you know, you would address. I mean, I think there was a lot of overlap here.
Oh, yes.
You know, a significant amount. So I don't think it's quite 5 pages long.
My notes are.
But I think that in terms of the concerns, you know, it would be wise to prioritize them once those come in. So, but again, I don't anticipate, you know, the idea is not to keep going over the same ground, but this was an opportunity. At the TRC, you had the opportunity to respond to the town departments and to the concerns of the other members of the TRC. And some of those have been answered and some of them still remain hanging. At this point, at the next meeting, that's your opportunity to address those issues.
And that'll be at your November meeting?
Yes.
And when is that?
23rd.
Lucky 23, twice in a row.
Paul, what,
Public hearings still open. I have one question.
Mr.
Chair, I would say that it's at your discretion. However, gentlemen, someone this over here asked to speak, someone in the back, and I'll hear an individual asked to speak. You stated no to the first 2. I don't want to create an issue. If you want to open it up to them,
no, I hear you.
I just don't want any legal issues.
Yeah, no, I got you. And I think we have to, you know, we've heard it and there will be a public hearing extended to the next. I mean, so I think there's opportunity. So Herb, if I can ask you for your thoughts on this?
Sure. Actually, the next regular meeting of the planning board is November 27th. I just said the 23rd, but it's the 27th, 6:30 here. The report that I prepared is a combination of the staff report and the technical review committee that most recently was held back on, I think it was October 12th. What I've tried to do in putting that together is of all the issues that I've read about in previous TRCs, and for those that I've experienced, the two that I've experienced, given the applications submitted to date, I put together a set of conditions and findings and conditions. Should you tonight decided to move forward with things. Two salient issues. You've already heard that the financial pro forma needs to be required. You cannot make a positive finding tonight. That this is one of the statutory requirements of the comp permit. You have to make positive findings to move forward with a comp permit on a number of different issues. In my staff report, it does indicate that you can't make a positive finding under that from that standpoint. So technically, you would have to, if I'm saying a couple things at the same time frame, so my apologies. So basically what you need to do, if you cannot make a positive finding, therefore you would have to deny the application on the basis of a lack of financial pro forma, unless you recess or continue the public hearing to the November 27th meeting, give the applicant a deadline of, say, Friday, November 17th to submit the necessary financial pro forma for your review. Also, one of those criteria prohibits you from making a positive finding tonight in that you do not know from the application that was submitted where the affordable units are specifically identified, and they have to be integrated throughout the development. So not knowing what the actual integration is, and meaning specifically which unit is which, you cannot make a positive finding under that statutory requirement as well. So those are the two issues that preclude you from, what I'm trying to do is get away from denying an application that is to continue to move forward, allow them to provide the information that's necessary, at least in that instance, to be able to make positive findings. And then you can continue your discussion and deliberations and entertain additional public comments should you choose to then deliberate on the application before you.
And that information would all be available, including the financial pro forma, to the public prior to the meeting.
What I'm suggesting, and here's your motion, is that you move to continue the public hearing to November 27th with a proviso that the applicant provide by Friday, November 17th, the financial pro forma necessary for you that meets statutory requirements, and also show on revised plans, probably just maybe the elevations can do it, show which units are designated as the affordable units. And the only other thing that I would add for your consideration as a third point is that that you, based on the number of issues, at least that I've heard and what's in the report before you tonight, in addition to the comments that have been heard, that you consider this only at the master plan level and not a combined master preliminary plan. Lastly, in order to continue this, you do have to have consent of the applicant to continue it. Because if you don't, the 90-day period under statute for reviewing this application will expire and therefore would basically be deemed approved if you didn't take action. In other words, if they don't consent to the continuance, you must deny the application tonight.
Okay. What he said, clearly before we move to the motion, and I'm sure you got it, because I'm not gonna repeat. We do need to ask for the approval of the continuance from the applicant.
If I may, as I said, Mr. Lennon has a hearing deficiency. I would like to have 5 minutes to speak with him out in private so I can speak with him, not whispers.
Sure.
Very good.
We'll have a short recess, 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're restarting here, so hello, hello, there you go. All right. Okay, it's like herding cats here, folks. There you go. All right, yeah. We're gonna go past my bedtime, I can tell. Okay,
The most effective way to do that is go shh.
yeah, right, yeah,
and
that
you
worked
see
with my
people
kids
to react.
really well.
It's funny. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak with my client in private. And so he can actually hear me because this is an issue. We do request that this matter be continued to your November hearing, please.
And you understand that this is a continuance of the master plan.
We understand that at this juncture, yes. We may be able to provide you with enough detail and data that it could be in fact master and preliminary if we give that
I
extra
can't
information.
promise that.
I
but,
understand.
Okay,
I'm not looking for a promise. I'm just looking for a
Yeah.
door not to be closed.
yeah, I hear you. And I appreciate everyone here. I mean, this is a difficult process, clearly. And anytime we have this kind of thing going on, but there has been a level of willingness to work with the town and to work and to listen to the concerns. So, you know, this is, and this is quite different from situations we've had here in the past. So, you know, I commend all of you for, you know, behaving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Yeah.
the applicant's attorney a question?
Sure.
Is November 17th okay for the deadline of information?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're ready for the motion that Herb had noted regarding, to summarize, but not doing it as well as Herb did, the matters of the pro forma and the identification of the individual affordable units within the development. Further, the 17th is the delivery date for the pro forma. I'll make that motion. Could I have a second? Second, Ashley, all in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay. So we will continue this. It will, I would say 6:30 again for that meeting on the 27th. And we anticipate having that information. I think it's helpful if you get a chance to read Herb's comments on the technical review committee, if you've got questions about what's going on here. Because I think that was due diligence has been done by the town on this matter. Doesn't mean it's a solution. It doesn't mean it's an approval or a denial, but it means that this has been given a great deal of thought. And quite frankly, it's been most helpful. The folks who have had their say here, it helps us, and it also helps the developer in terms of understanding the sentiment of the community. So thank you all. And we're going to have just a short 5-minute recess before we move on to our next matter, which we have to finish by 9. So you're We're gonna restart now, shortly. We'll get you out of here, Allison, quickly.
Sorry,
Um,
my fault. You guys had a long meeting.
Yeah, we're going to, but, well, I would like to handle, economic development.
Yeah.
We, whew. Okay, so that, what we're dealing with now is the economic development, part of the comprehensive plan. We have already looked at this. This is a second iteration. Bear with me. Oh, damn. Herb, yeah, you've got it.
Go through it. So
Let's-
you'll notice in red and underline and strike through all the changes that I made based on the planning board's input, from a couple weeks ago, your special meeting. So, just a minor change to the first goal. But then there was a significant number of changes to implementation, actions, a little bit of changes to policies, some additional action items added in. And as you recall, last draft we didn't have the responsible party timeframe or priority completed. So I took a stab at entering those fields with some proposed parties, timeframe, priority number for your review and consideration. So we could probably go through those first, and then there's some minor changes in the content, the narrative, but if you want to go through those policies and action items, and let me know if you have any further changes to those.
Okay.
Let's see. So
Anybody feel free to dive in here on, I've lost, my access to my computer. There you go. Great, let me grab my access.
I mean, from what I've seen, I think it encompasses everything we've talked about.
Allison, the only thing that I'll offer at this point is based on the two sets of comments that the state's given back, we better take into consideration the 2040 state plan because they somehow want that referenced.
I'm gonna make sure,
Yeah.
that seems to be, it was referenced in one of them, but yeah, to specifically state how our plan is furthering the state's goals in their state guide plan element. So
Right.
I will, go through our supporting documents, make sure we have, and what did I have this? I have their SEDS listed.
So there's the 2030 plan, but Commerce is just now going to be releasing a new state SEDS.
Yeah.
You might want to
Yeah.
reference that.
The SEDS here, the guide plan, Rhode Island Rising, that was from 2014. That's their economic development element.
Yeah, and now,
Yeah, so I'll
Where
go
are
through
we?
those. So on supporting documents and resources.
Oh,
the
okay.
state-
Oh, well,
the
let's stick
comments
with,
Yeah, just to explain the comments the state has provided on our other draft elements that we submitted.
Right.
They want us to reference those state guide plans and, all their state.
was there
plan
any
documents.
need
And we-
to build those into this thing or simply to include them?
no, so I've actually looked at the plan. And so a lot of the things that we've put in here are consistent with what the state will be rolling out for the new SEDS. Which is good. So as long as we kind of, I think, cite it and say that our plan is in line with what the state is looking to do in the future,
Okay.
we should be good.
Yeah, just pull out some goals that they have that are the same as ours. That's what I was just going through with the transportation element.
No, it's okay. So within this first page, policy implementation, responsible party, timeframe, priority. Economic Development Board, is that realistic to have them be accountable? This is my same issue with the, Conservation Commission. Does that board have either the political will or the actual power to move these
I'd say
actions
they're
forward?
less, the Conservation Commission, is more of a statutorily enabled thing, empowered through the charter and that sort of stuff. The Economic Development Board is more enabled through the charter and internally here. Depending on the town council, if they wanted to strengthen their duties and responsibilities, they could. But I would think of them right at this point more as an ad hoc, make recommendations to the town council. I think you should sort of see them more as when you want to do something to seek their insight prior to or as part of a town council decision-making process.
I do have to say, so I was on that board before this board, and there is a very great group of people, both business owners and residents. And the board's almost a little lost in things to do. So I think some of these that are in here, they're not really decision-making, but it's like help to market. I think giving them this would actually, they would do really well and empower, because it's not like they're like making rules or regulations. It's very much like work with the Chamber of Commerce to promote a healthy relationship. So kind of facilitating that and giving them tasks that are very concrete is, I think they would appreciate it as well and actually want to see that.
Well, I'm concerned about putting responsibility on the shoulders of an ad hoc body.
Like this one's like collaborate with the arts related organizations and economic development partners such as the East Bay Chamber to foster good relationships. And so it's not really like
Well,
it's a
the first time it appears is DBA
ruler out there to govern it.
I want to be careful that if we're calling, in order to get this stuff moving, I think there's like Economic Development Board, the building official. I'm not sure either one of those would be the actual, the motive force behind that. I mean, would it be the town council to them or the planning board to them?
From my perspective, I'd rather see the planner instead of the building official on EDA 3 as a for instance.
Yeah.
Economic Development Board, I think is appropriate in there. And because I'm sort of the staff person responsible to that group as well, so we can work in tandem.
Okay, so there's that one. So I take out building official and put in the planner. EDA 6. Don't we have an arts related group here? In
the Warren Arts and Culture Committee.
Yeah, I actually did include them in some of the action items. I'm not sure how active they were, but I saw that on the website, so
yeah, that should be in under ADA 6.
Yeah, they are active.
Okay, I'll add them to.
I get to staff them too.
So really it should just be planner. Delegating, planner gets to delegate to who he thinks would get it done.
And I think the same is true of EDA 7.
Yes.
Because again, I think those are groups that could, seeking funding for arts and culture and historic preservation, that's a paid position.
That's me as the grants person too.
Yeah.
I know.
Just letting you know what I do.
I know. I'm trying.
Well, so for example, you can put that in mind, because like when I seek funding for work and I see something, I shoot it over and say, hey, maybe you guys are, maybe Warren's interested in this, in case you haven't seen it.
Again, I'd like to have some people working with the planner. It's too many volunteer boards that I'm involved and have been involved when, they like to meet, but they don't necessarily like to do anything.
Yeah.
And you want, if they're going to be responsible, you want them to understand that requires an action more so than just showing up to a meeting.
And I think it's sometimes when you don't have expectations, and so then people do just need to meet. But I think in giving responsibilities to certain groups and putting it in here, this is one way too.
Yeah, so maybe it's the cart before the horse or the horse.
Why not? Hey,
Yeah.
and then if people are on the board who don't want to do that, then they can step off and we can find.
Yeah, and again, I'd put the arts and cultural people
Yeah.
on that one as well, because I think,
Yeah.
you know, again, it's like one thing to say I support the arts and another to actually do something about it.
And certainly, I mean, the plan, having this implementation table will be a standalone element in your comp plan, and you can resort by responsible party and distribute those to all the responsible parties, and then the planning board's role is to kind of check in like annually, like on the status of how, you know, how are we doing in implementing our comprehensive plan? and
once we
they can
finish
provide
it.
updates. And responsible party, yeah, I mean, certainly volunteer boards can, not that they're ultimately, there's, I mean, in these cases, yeah, they're a group of volunteers, but you can get active members that are willing to, you know, draft up some narrative for grants. And, you know, obviously the planner is gonna be the one that's submitting it and doing the, you know, as the municipal.
Right, but I think as
official.
Ashley said, you know, if you know, if they know that their names of their group is down there, there's more of an opportunity for Herb or whoever it is, you know, even the planning board to say, you know, what have you been doing lately? You know, as opposed to, they're not held accountable.
I think if I may, Mr. Chair, I think to toot my own horn a little bit, I think
Please do.
the efficacy of a lot of the boards and commissions is partly a function of the staff and the ability to be staffed to a certain level. For instance, I think the voluntary historic committee would do well. Admittedly, I'm a great administrative officer for them, but I think they would do better if they had even just a part-time professional historic district type of a person or a contractor type that could do the review of the larger applications, making recommendation to them. I think they would be much better suited to have that expertise behind them rather than the board itself relying on its own expertise to do that.
I agree. So how about would that be then an action or even a policy to create a position and potentially one that could do more than just historic, could potentially do arts and cultural as well? And I mean,
yeah, I'm well aware the town is not really interested in creating new positions. From that
But
standpoint.
so what?
But again, tooting my own horn, I can tell you just from laughing tonight in terms of the committees that I staff and dealing with this board and that sort of stuff, my arms are getting longer every day the way I'm getting pulled. So I do think, again, with your, you know, concurrence, it would be helpful that some of these chapters where you have these committees, that somehow we weave in the need for at least some extra part-time assistance for some of these committees, or a person that's shared, you know, another person of me that could at least focus on some committee work and some grant work. My office used to have a part-time grant person, it was the planner, and then a half-time grant.
well, that's how Bob started.
So, right, exactly. So it'd be nice to at least go back to
To that.
to the original when Kate was the planner.
Well, it doesn't have to be the same person all the time either, right? I mean, you can do this
No.
by
The
contract.
contract.
and
No,
Put a contract in if you.
Right, like with
historic
historic
thing, or
preservation,
If you've
right.
got a natural resources
Yeah,
thing.
I'm not gonna find for the town a qualified historic preservationist to review 2 applications a month, right? It's just not gonna happen
Right.
unless we have them on a consulting basis,
Right.
and they can offer up some of that time that we pay an hourly rate, time and material.
Well, should we go back then to the goal and indicate the need for a contract employee to help?
Come up. This would come up during the historic preservation element, and there was a concern with putting in a recommendation to like hire staff within the comp plan. I know that was some, like, it had been one of the recommendations of the historic district committee, and we left it out back a few months ago.
How about?
So-
No, I remember that. That's right. And I think the way that it was presented was more like a full-time. I'm not sure it wasn't more like a
But-
full-time person as opposed to a contracted person for
Right.
specific tasks.
How about the ability to fund individual contracts for consulting as needed? You know, like, you wouldn't have staff, You just have a contract if you know, the ability to put under, hire a consultant for individual tasks.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just not sure if it is necessary to put into a comp plan. I mean, I think that's something the town can do without it being in here, but maybe it would go, it sounds like it's falling under a lot of different categories
Yeah.
where this need is. I mean, we all get it, municipal planners are, like,
Well,
the
could we put
towns
that
are
in our back
understaffed,
pocket
so-
until we get the revised plan back and then potentially plug that in?
we could plug it in. What I was gonna say is in your, public services element, because that seems to be, this is more general than
More
economic
relevant.
development, so I could add that as an action item
Okay.
in that plan, or speak to that in the narrative, just generally about how, additional staffing or, whether
Right, without getting-
consultant support that's needed to support the work of the boards and implementing this comprehensive plan, and, we
Okay.
could certainly add that.
Yeah, I'd put it like the general because it does fall into so
All
many.
right, so let's aim for that.
And then what you mentioned earlier about the Economic Development Board, is there maybe an action item regarding their mission or their, what they're responsible for as far as putting that specifically as an action item, as, broadening, expanding the scope of. their
Establish the
work?
responsibilities, the specific responsibilities for the Economic Development Board.
That is out from us, taking that from an ad hoc to a traditional commission or committee, as a traditional commission or committee requires public meeting notice, minutes, et cetera. And that's
Okay.
a lot of legal guidance to stay away from those, because every time they meet, gotta be up, the minutes have to be done, it's gotta be public place, et cetera. So I know that some of the policy issues that come up when
Yeah.
the town council is kind of deciding whether or not just a board with wide versus one of authority.
And that Arts and Cultural Commission, is that also like the ad hoc? Yeah.
So the tree commission, I'm looking at what Herb has up behind you, Conservation Commission is an existing board. Tree Commission,
Yeah, the historic, the Economic Development Committee is not in the charter. So that must have been established separately by town council.
I think Bob might have done that. The Economic Development.
Oh, they have to meet all that.
Yeah, I chaired that board, we didn't have minutes or anything like that.
It's like a chapel.
Yeah.
Real responsibility for us, because that's what applies.
So, okay, so going back to the responsible party, assigning those ad hoc committees as a responsible party, are we
think you have to put in-
comfortable with that, or maybe we always?
I
have,
think
like,
you have to put in the
staff-
planner.
The staff
me.
person with it.
Yeah, I think so too, because I was thinking that some of these things, I mean, it almost sounds like you almost need like an assistant planner that is gonna handle implementing.
I
a
think
lot
we
of
have somebody from the
board
Economic
type things,
Development
you know?
Committee here.
Big public comments. But rather than say planner, why not planning and community development department? Which then gives room to add staff or consultants to take on these tasks.
Yeah, I like it.
It is the part of the planning and community development.
All right, let's go for that. Yeah, I like it a lot.
And then you can plug that in.
Right.
That's actually, I think how she has it in there, you have it as
I
planning.
put it as planning, like short for planning department,
Yeah,
but I
right.
mean, certainly, this is not like,
It's a small box.
anybody can.
Along with
there's
that-
one
Yeah, but I mean, I
ability
just
here.
think if we
This is
take
just a
out
plan.
Economic Development Board and building, that you want to have the actual board, there. And ultimately, it's going to devolve into that department, although that department is only one person right now. Our goal is to see if we can staff it up.
One
They're the
thing,
duties of the town.
so one thing that I would say, just having been on economic development, is that because it doesn't have its name designated in a lot of places, it was exceedingly difficult to get the town to support you in any area, because they all looked at you as like, oh, it's just, people like to go sit down in the basement and talk about business, and so having it in the language that sort of empowers them, even if you have planning with them every single time you mention them, so that it's clear.
Well, number two is advise the planning board. And I've never, in the 14 years I've been serving on the planning board, have never had the Economic Development Board come before the planning board in any way, shape, or form. So.
You asked.
Well,
You asked them.
no, it says it's their duty to advise the planning. Yeah, no, I know you're not. But so I'm saying, I think that the nature of putting it in there, this could change what's going on. I mean, it would, if they were held to those duties, then what happened with you wouldn't happen, because
Well,
the
yeah,
planning board is saying, what are you doing here?
We went and deliberated about presenting a letter to like planning board or town council of like a recommendation. And it was like this, we didn't know about this, because obviously that was what we were supposed to be doing all the time. But we were thinking like this, you think we're allowed to actually send this letter in, or, if we worked with, it was before Kate, Jan was there. And so it was, but the whole thing was to just try to make sure that we could have somebody that would hear our recommendation. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
Great.
and those
So-
duties there are quite broad, so probably don't need to worry about amending those, but look, number 3
I
right
would
there,
just-
talks about implementing the economic development section of the comp plan, so I think it's certainly appropriate to have another responsible party if their duties include
Yep.
implementing, it's assisting the planning board with implementing the comp plan.
But again, if that's the case, responsible party has to be, then, a planning board above, or the planning and community development board or department. I just want to have, in the responsible parties, the priority, the directing party first.
Right, if it implies that there's implementation in the.
Right, anything here is
It says
all,
assisting in implementation.
right, so anything here has to be
Okay.
either the
so-
planning board or the planning department as the first.
All right, since the planning board, since the planning department, community development department staffs those boards, I'll put the planning department as well with those boards for the other responsible party. Okay.
Let's move on to the next page here, hoping we can get this done. No later than 9:30.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, no, but I would like to get this done, and I'd like to spare us a special meeting in November, if possible. Yes.
I'm impressed with how you can decipher all of our chicken scratch into all in these tables, I feel like you collected everything that we said, so good. Nice job.
So again, anything that says Economic Development Board, Arts and Cultural, Historic District Committee, they can all be under the planning board.
Yep.
Or department, I don't care, either one of the two. This is all stuff that we talked about. We did talk about doing some kind of a, under EDA 13, the creation of an app for public parking.
Well, yeah, I think it was like at least go to a web page with the QR code.
Like you'd have one of those little QR codes
code,
that
yeah.
you could swipe over. We talked about that.
I don't think you need an app for that.
Let's maybe keep it broad. Speak different technology-based parking solutions. Something like that.
Emails, especially Allison, about generally where you guys have come to agreement on sort of like the QR codes, the the idea of the hospital take, take.
Yeah, yeah.
Parking lot
Mhm.
to the waterfront, and you had a list of options as well. Email, house, so you had a good summary.
Okay.
Of the meeting, so she. So, conditions and-
Have a QR code, right? On landmarks, but I'd also say a QR code for parking, because this parking thing enters every issue that we're dealing with, particularly in the historic district, and I think increasingly it's going to be in neighborhoods too. I mean, I'll tell you, the landscaping trucks are crazy. I grew up with a guy in a pickup truck. Now these folks are showing up like they're moving furniture. And they're taking up huge amounts of space. I mean, you try and drive in my neighborhood, you're stopping every half mile because the road's blocked by a landscaper and his giant freaking trailer. It's crazy. It's like insane. It's like, when did this happen?
And they're loud. Very loud.
Yeah, how about oh, don't even get me started on the gas leaf blower, the guy moving one leaf with $4 worth of gas. Use a rake, you idiot. Jeez.
So it was the only mod there? The QR code so visitors can access information
Yeah, there's a typo, that sentence,
Love
that
it.
last
on landmarks, parking in businesses. I think it was just adding parking.
parking.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have no
Anything
other
else on
comments.
that?
Yeah, like I said, I think it captures everything I was trying to get.
Onto EDP 9. I mean, short of changing some of those responsible parties, I haven't seen anything. I don't know if anybody else has, or this is all, what reflects what we talked about, as far as I'm concerned, so.
Concur.
If that's the case, then you can move to have Allison put her final changes and shoot.
I move that.
I'd second it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so I would say the next thing we do is to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Question for you, does that, because those other two elements weren't, does that mean we have to do a special meeting?
We may need to do one between November and December, between after our meeting on the 27th, sometime in December.
So we're not gonna have any meetings before the 27th.
No,
Great.
yeah,
Right now, we don't have meetings. The fourth Monday is Christmas. So that is gonna be.
oh, so maybe we'll have a special meeting and
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So how many more do we have then? We have two more.
Many more elements we need to cover.
100.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.